everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Abby and today I'm going to be doing my last reading wrap-up of the year, otherwise known as the 8 books that I read in December. The first 4 books that I read this month, I did read for a vlog that I was doing for the first 2 weeks of December. In that vlog I had the intention of summoning snow, and little update on that, even though I didn't get a whole lot of snow within the 2 weeks that I filmed that vlog, I was snowed in for the majority of my winter break, so I did a pretty good job. I summoned a lot of snow, so much so that I was actually concerned that I was not going to be able to get home in time for classes to start. So maybe I did a little too well with that. But I am going to kind of speed through the first 4 a little bit. If you want to know more about both my thoughts and the book itself, you can go to that vlog. But the first book that I finished in the month of December was No Exit by Taylor Adams. I finished this on December 6th. Most people probably know what this is about because this is a booktube darling. But brief synopsis for those blissfully unaware of this book's presence. That makes it sound like I didn't like the book. I did. We've got this young college student who is unexpectedly going home for the holidays. She did not think she was going to be going home for Christmas, but because of a family emergency, she starts driving and she hits a blizzard. So she has to pull over and wait it out at this rest stop with a couple of other travelers. But while she's outside this rest stop looking for a signal so she can contact her family, she happens to see that there is a child locked in the back of one of the cars in a cage. So immediate red flag there. And of course, with the conditions that she's dealing with, this means that she has to basically single-handedly foil a kidnapping plot that's happening right in front of her. I have to say that this book somehow, some way, lived up to the hype. And this book has a lot of hype. I have heard, and this would be a conservative estimate, at least 10 booktubers rave about this book. It's really gory, it's really twisty, it always has you on the edge of your seat. I really liked that the situation was realistic enough. I don't want to say it's necessarily realistic, but it could conceivably happen. And I liked that because the whole time you're watching Darby try to figure out what to do, you're putting yourself in her shoes and being like, all right, how would I puzzle my way out of this? I gave this one 4 stars. It was really fun and I definitely would recommend it. Next up we have not as great of a book, The Winter Girl by Marinovich, which I finished on December 9th. This book is about a couple that moves into the home of the wife's dying father. I'm gonna say that again. This is about a couple who moves into the house of the wife's dying father. The wife's dad, he's dying, and they're staying in his house. There we go. While they're there, the husband, who is unemployed and pretty much does nothing with his time, notices that the house next door, the lights are on a timer. At 11 p.m. sharp every single night, they always go off. So he's thinking, somebody has abandoned this house and for some reason wants people to think that there's someone still living there. So he decides he's gonna break in. And what happens next? Thriller things, but not the fun kind. I'll tell you that right now. I wrote in my notes that the promises of thriller-esque things come about, which is accurate. They promise some thriller things. I don't know if it necessarily happens. Although the biggest problem with this book is not that it's boring. When I first picked up this book, it was just something I grabbed from the shelf off the library, didn't know anything about it, didn't do any research on it, just was all right, that sounds like I could have a good time with that. And when I started reading it and I went to put in my progress into Goodreads, I saw that it had a 2.73 average rating, which is the lowest average rated book I've ever picked up. And so the whole time I was reading it, I was kind of looking to see all right, what is warranting this terrible average rating? I do have some things that would warrant that rating. There definitely are some intriguing things going on with this plot, and there were moments where I was having a good time, but the plot ended up so convoluted and ridiculous that it just couldn't really deliver on any of the intrigue that it established in the first place, and it did not help that the protagonist was probably my least favorite protagonist of the year. It's just this guy that has been fired from his job and makes no effort in his life ever, and he literally said to my face, he said, misery is an art form, and I read that and I threw up in my mouth. Things like that, I just didn't like it. I ended on a 1 star with this one, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to give more time to this book because, I already spent the hours I did reading it, but I would insert a little content warning for anybody that is still interested in this book, which, hey, you could love it, I don't know, but content warning for just some very, very poorly handled depictions of sexual abuse. Real bad. Just real bad. Moving back into good books, Dead Mountain by Donnie Eichar I read on December 10th. This is a nonfiction, which I am not a nonfiction gal. In fact, this was the only nonfiction book that I completed in 2021. I did try and read a couple of nonfiction books, but I got bored every time. I'm not a nonfiction gal. However, this piece of nonfiction is following 9 hikers that disappeared in 1959 while hiking through Russia. Said hikers died, and it's not a spoiler that they're dead. You find out on like page 1, died under very bizarre circumstances, and there have been all kinds of conspiracies following these 9 hikers ever since the 50s. Aided quite a lot by the fact that Russia just loves to be shady about pretty much anything. Even when like they have nothing to actually be shady about, they will be shady. I do mention in the vlog that this book kind of ticks all the boxes for me. Like if I'm ever going to like a nonfiction, I'm going to like this one. I love Russia. I think it's super interesting. I took a Russian history class and just loved it. I'm a big fan of true crime, and my favorite true crimes are always the ones where like nobody fully knows what happened and all of the events are so bizarre that sorry, the washer's going. And all of the events are so bizarre that, like, there's never fully a way to explain it. So when I opened this book, the concept alone, I was like, I'm gonna have to give this 3 stars. Or at the very least finish it, let's be real. But I was very moved by the way that the author humanized these characters, despite really having very little in common with them. The author's American. He's trying to get into the minds of 9 young Russians from the 50s. And he just did such a good job humanizing them. I'd give this book 4 stars. I think it's really well done. Next up we have Orbiting Jupiter by Gary D. Schmidt. This is a book that I completed on the 14th of December, the last book from the reading vlog. This is a very short novel with very large text. So if you're looking for something short, this would be the perfect book. We're following Jack, who is in like 6th grade, and his family has recently taken in a foster brother named Joseph. Now Joseph is 14 years old, and all Jack really knows about him is that at one point he attempted to kill his teacher, and also he is a father to a baby girl, which of course to like a 6th grader that's kind of difficult to fathom that somebody your age could have a baby. Being the slim book that it is, this book is quite sparse, but it still manages to be very impactful. I thought this was a great book for young readers to pick up just because it does a really good job of examining the tragedy that sometimes can occur when you have somebody that is not living a conventional life, because in our current society a lot of times we don't have a way to sustain that. So I also who am I to award things? I also gave this one 4 stars. And because we're just swinging back and forth from like good reviews to real bad reviews, let's head into our next 1-star read, which was When We Were Lost by Kevin Wignall, which I finished on the 19th of December. In this novel, we have a plane that crashes in the jungle. There are 19 survivors, all of whom were on a class trip. So this is in fact a young adult thriller. It was like marketed as a thriller, but the thrill factor on this book is quite low. So these classmates then have to figure out how to find help and survive in the jungle. And you may think that I've been throwing out a lot of like worst of 2021s at you, so like you might think that I'm exaggerating when I say this, but no, I am not. This was by far the worst characterization of 2021. And not in terms of like these characters are unlikable, although I didn't like them. It's just difficult for me to fathom, and this is coming from somebody that enjoys writing characters. How did a book do this little in terms of characterization and still get published? How? I would love to know. Like I said, there are 19 survivors for pretty much the entire book. And when I say pretty much, I actually mean like all of the book. We know all of them just based on name alone. There are, of course, a handful that do get a little bit more, but basically nothing. We're reading everything through Tom's perspective. Granted, Tom is kind of a loner, but I would argue that even loners do tend to know something about their peers. Now, every time a new character is introduced to us, the readers, Tom, even though he usually does know who they are, will just say what their name is, and that is it. Occasionally, this is the most you'll ever get, he will say something like, they're in my English class, or they are in my science class. That is it. That is all you're gonna get. And there's 19 of these kids. I let this slide for a very long time, mostly because I was thinking, like, we're gonna cut the numbers at some point. Like, some of these kids have to die. And, like, yeah, some do. Not nearly enough, I'll say that right now. But before we get into that issue that I had with this book, that there were not enough enough deaths, and honestly the deaths that they did have were ridiculous. I'll explain. Let's first finish up on the characterization thought, because heaven knows I'm prone to tangents. The lead in this is revered for absolutely no reason at all. There were times that I genuinely thought the book was going to end with the main character waking up and like it was all a dream, and he just had been like really wanting to have the love and support of his classmates or whatever. Like there's one moment towards the end where one of the characters like straight up says like, we should have all been more like Tom. And I was like, what does that even mean? What has Tom done that the rest of you haven't? The villain of the story is similarly unfleshed, not fleshed out. Unfleshed. I'm coining that term now. This villain's name is Joel, and Joel's villainy basically just consists of the main character having some strange contempt for this person. Right from the get-go, Joel is kind of trying to take control of the situation and like help, and Tom doesn't like this for reasons unknown. Everybody in Tom's little posse will frequently say things like, Joel's a jerk, and I was like, okay, he's a jerk. You're telling me he's a jerk. Where? Like there were certainly times where I was just like, okay, I can kind of see the jerk factor there, but like if you are going to die on this hill that this person is like the villain of the story, like give me a little more, please. Like there was one point where Tom, the main guy, and then like his little love interest, her name was Alice, could not stand her, they were like joking about killing Joel, and like only kind of joking, and I was just like, we're gonna kill this guy? What? I was Team Joel. I was Team Joel. I was. It basically boils down to the author was just forcing how we were supposed to feel as readers. And I cannot stand that. If an author is telling me you must feel this way about this person or this person, I'm going to automatically feel the opposite way. And I understand that this book is written for teens, but teens should be able to come to their own conclusion. Like, if a character does something, it's a little silly if it is either instantly rewarded or instantly punished, because then it just automatically shows like, oh, this person was stupid, this person was oh so smart. And that kind of felt like the whole book. There were a lot of times when Joel wanted to do something and his idea was not a bad idea, but every time he would do it, some like crazy dramatic scenario would happen just to prove Tom right. And it drove me bonkers. 1 star, characterization, not optional, and then just because I want to talk about it, the deaths in this book, oh my. The first person to die stepped on a snake and like immediately died. That one I was willing to overlook. I was a little bit like, oh, okay, they're dead. I don't know enough about snakes to like combat that. The next death, they were out gathering sticks. By the way, spoilers, I guess. I don't think anyone should read this, but they're out gathering sticks. And Tom saw a jaguar, and so he ran back and was like, oh my gosh, there's a jaguar. And then later they realized they had one person missing, so they were like, oh shoot, we gotta save her from the jaguar. So they go to save her from the jaguar. It was too late, she was done. And how they knew she was done is there was a pool of blood and a singular sneaker left behind, because a jaguar takes off someone's sneaker when he feeds. That's not a thing. The third death was oh, it was a moment. One of the characters got heat stroke, which, like, I'm not going to downplay the severity of it. However, they're trying to help him. They're trying to get him water. They're trying to do all of, like, the basics. And one of the characters, keep in mind, high school students, none of them have gone to medical school. One of the characters like says to the main character, like, he's gonna die anyway, whether we give him water or not, so we shouldn't give him water. And I was like, and we're just gonna listen to you? Like, what reason do we have to think he's just gonna die right now? Like, heat stroke is a survivable thing. But because you can never make your own assumptions about who's right or who's wrong in any given situation with this book, the character immediately dies. I think that was all of the deaths. There were probably more that I just forgot. There was one guy that almost died. He didn't. They were on these rafts, and like his leg broke and he like went into the water. And like that one, I was a little bit more like, okay, I can understand this death. Like, your leg is out for the count and you immediately get thrown into like a rushing river. Like, yeah, you might not make it. But he was fine. Yeah, anyway, I thought this book was very bad. 1 star. Unfortunately, I was not out of the negative review trenches just yet. The next book I picked up was The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling, and I finished this on December 21st. This book is a pretty recent release. I have had it on my radar for a long time and I was really excited about it, but I did notice once I started reading that the rating, which had once been very high, as they usually are when the book first comes out, had since plummeted to like a 3.29, and I can understand why. Our main character, Jane, is introduced to us as a woman who has no romantic leanings. I was fully prepared for the author to say that she was asexual. I was excited even. I was like, yay, representation. Jane wants to set up this marriage of convenience with this doctor named Dr. Lawrence. Augustine Lawrence is his full name. And she sets up like a meeting with him. He basically is like, I don't really want to marry you. But she's like, no, listen, like, I get it. I'm not really one for love. We don't have to communicate. We don't have to touch each other. We don't have to look at each other. It'll be perfect. And he's like, okay, I get the appeal. And so he does agree to this marriage, but then his one condition is like, you can't come to my family's like manor, which, you know, red flag there, but Jane's like, sure, whatever. And of course, for the plot to continue, Jane has to not listen to this one request, so she does show up at the manor. Spooky things start to happen. I'll get into what those spooky things are in a little bit. If you like the sound of this book, go for it. I think that it does have an audience. The audience is just not me. I had one major issue right off the bat with this book, and it was so frustrating to me because I don't know why this couldn't have been remedied. It would have been such an easy fix, but it caused so many problems. This main issue was that the characterization was sloppy too early on. Now, obviously, there is a big difference between a character reversal, because those can be fine if done correctly, and just straight up being sloppy. This was being sloppy, because we have Jane, who, in the beginning, very resolutely, like, I don't like love. I don't like romance. I don't want to touch anyone. I don't want to look at anyone. I just want to do my numbers. She's like a numbers person, which may have been another reason why I didn't like this book. I'm not a numbers person. Could not relate. But that is the characterization we get right off the bat with Jane. And so that's like one of the first things I learn about her. And then 24 hours later, literally within 24 hours of knowing Augustine Lawrence, her husband-to-be, she falls in love with him and is like, and this is just such an easy fix, because instead of just having her do a complete 180, if you had just tweaked the way she was presented in the beginning and maybe had her just be like really lonely and maybe she just kind of given up on the idea of love, that would make so much more sense than her like genuinely not wanting to fall in love and then within 24 hours being like, never mind, I think I do like love. Like, I get it, human beings are fickle, but like that's just a little too fickle for my liking. And when you've got such like sloppy characterization, and like once again, I think this would have been fixed so easily with a little bit of editing. Because that happened so early on, I just immediately kind of lost trust in the author and lost trust in her team of editors too, because I was just like, why did someone not catch that? And what else are they not going to catch? Turns out quite a bit. And so for the majority of the book, I was kind of just in like a 3-star, like, meh, this is fine. It just kind of depends on where it goes. But then this book just went places I didn't want to go. Some people could consider this a spoiler, so if you want to read this, don't watch. I consider it to be more of a warning, to be honest. Black magic in this book consists of needing to stay awake for a week, which means that you have to do cocaine for a week to stay awake, and eating chicken fetuses. Miss Jane spends 100 pages of this book shooting up cocaine. Do you shoot up cocaine? Doing cocaine so she doesn't fall asleep, and eating chicken fetuses. 100 pages of this. 100 pages, at least. I think there was even more. Like, I'm not kidding when I say 100 pages of this book is dedicated to black magic, which... So, yeah, just not for me. Not my type of book. That's a subjective thing. Doesn't necessarily make it a bad book. I'm sure somebody out there in the world wants to read about somebody swallowing fertilized eggs and doing cocaine. But I do think that this book needed a comprehensive edit. In the acknowledgments of this book, Caitlin Starling had said that this book had been through like multiple rounds of editing, and that she had kind of cobbled together a lot of those edited pieces. I just cannot see how this book went through like one, like, all right, now let's make sure everything fits together, because it just felt like there were a lot of mistakes in that way. Like the story just felt very disjointed, and part of me honestly feels bad that this was published as is, because I think it could have been so much better, and it's just a little bit heartbreaking that it didn't get more attention before it went out the door. So I gave this one 2 stars. Flaws aside, I think it has an audience. It's just not me. Now, I said that I finished The Death of Jane Lawrence on December 21st. This is true, but it was like midnight that night. Like I was like, I cannot take this book with me to another day. I need to just end it now. So let me paint a picture. It's the morning of December 21st. I am very disappointed in my last 2 reads, and those 2 reads were the first books that I had read while on winter break, and I was just feeling like, man, maybe I only brought duds home with me for winter break, and how sad would that be? So on December 21st, I was like, I need a winner. I need a winner right now. And she arrived. Her name was Midnight at the Electric. She was written by Jodi, Lynn Anderson, and she was lovely. This book is primarily historical fiction, but it has some smatterings of sci-fi. We start with Adri, or Audrey, I think you say it Adri. It's spelled like this. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. But Adri has been accepted to go to Mars. This is in the year of 2065. But while in training, she stumbles upon some correspondences that indicate that she is somehow connected to 2 different women from decades before. Said women are named Catherine and Lenore. Now, Catherine is a teenager living in the time of the Dust Bowl, and Lenore is a young woman who has just lost her brother in World War I. So yes, this book, which by the way is about 250 pages, deals with 3 different timelines, 3 different main characters, and 3 different settings. And when I read the synopsis, when I saw this in the library, I was like, okay, good luck with that, Miss Jodi Lynn Anderson. Like, there's no way this book did not bite off more than it can chew. This book's gonna be a mess. And New Year's resolution, I need to stop being so pessimistic, because this book was so good. The confidence in which the author approached this book was just stunning. To go from The Death of Jane Lawrence, which I really felt like was kind of sloppily thrown together, to this, which was just like so well thought out and so well executed, I was just like blown away. As soon as I started reading this book, there was just no doubt in my mind that the author was going to be able to pull it off and was going to be able to fully develop these 3 characters, settings, and timelines. This book was so nuanced and gorgeous. There were so many incredible messages about like the power and strength of humanity, but at the same time, like each timeline is set against like crises that humanity created for itself, but it's somehow like so hopeful and beautiful, and it was so well done. So I don't do this often, but this was a 5-star read. I just get more and more confident with my rating the further I get away from it. Like, it was just so well done. And I'm really excited to read more from this author, because holy cow, she is so good at what she does. Like, wow. And on to our final book. I just remembered, I literally have 4 of these books still. Do you want to see these books in the flesh? Here's The Death of Jane Lawrence. That's how long she is. That's the way the pages flop. Here's When We Were Lost. That's how long it is. That's how the pages flop. There you go. Here's Midnight at the Electric. Look how tiny that is. 250 pages. That's that. Why didn't I hold them up? I literally set them all on my windowsill for me to grab so I could hold them up and show you and do all kinds of fun things. But no, that time has passed. So we'll just do it for the last book, which is a very tiny and adorable book called Catch the Rabbit. It's written by Lana Bastasic. I finished this on December 29th, so this was my last completed read of the year. So in this book, we open with a girl named Sarah who is living in Dublin. She grew up in Bosnia. Now, Sarah gets a phone call from a friend that she has not spoken to in 12 years. Said friend, just like right out the gate, no hello, no how are you, is just like, hey, I need you to drive me to Vienna. And Sarah's like, no, like we have not spoken in 12 years. I'm not just gonna drop everything to do you a favor, like absolutely not. But then her friend's like, no, listen, remember that brother I had that went missing when we were kids? he's alive and he's in Vienna. I need you to drive me there now. And Sarah's like, okay, all right, I'll drive you there right now. Now, if you like missing person stories, which I love them, I feel you, I hear you, this isn't it. It's not a missing person story. Don't go into it thinking it is. You will be furious. This is a road trip book at its heart. And really the whole point of this book, if I had to articulate it, is just a look at how our perspective shapes our relationships, no matter how hard we try to make it not shape our relationships. I honestly think I'm gonna be thinking about this book for like months. It's very complex, yet taxing to read. I don't know if I was always enjoying it necessarily. Like, I could only read about 60 pages of this at a time before I would be like, I need to put this book down. The way it's written requires like all of your focus. But the way that this relationship between these two women is rendered is just so all-encompassing and engaging, and I think that's really why I had such a hard time reading big chunks of this book at once, just because I was like, this is too much. I have read quite a few like books about toxic female friendships this year. Some successes, some utter failures. I have to say this is the best. And I wouldn't even say that like the play-by-play of what's happening in this book is that unique. Like, a lot of what these two friends go through, I feel like I have seen some form of it before, but really it all just comes down to the perspective of this book. Like, it's just, this book's a trip. And I am not the only person that thinks that. Like, the majority of the blurbs in here are like, this book messed me up. And another thing about this book, because I don't think I mentioned it yet, it is actually translated from Serbo-Croatian. I believe the original came out a couple years ago, but it just came out in English for the first time, and the author actually translated it herself. It was really, really interesting reading this book because there is quite a lot of focus on the Balkan War, I believe. It was a war that happened in Bosnia, and I know pretty much nothing about it. The stereotype of Americans being pretty self-absorbed is mostly true, especially within the school setting. We do not really learn about things that don't have to do with America in some capacity. And so going into this book, a big focus of this book is this war that I know pretty much nothing about. And of course, this book is not written for Americans either, so when you're reading it, there's nobody holding your hand and being like, hey, this is what happened, this is how it affected us. It's all written as if, you know, you were there, which to the people that are reading this in the native language, they were. And it was just so interesting to just like step into this culture so fully and to like not have somebody like holding my hand and guiding me through it. And I think I actually got a lot more out of this book that way, which seems kind of counterintuitive to say that I got more out of this book from like not fully knowing the facts of things, but I really just felt like I was just there and in the shoes of somebody that is so far removed from my life and my experiences. And I've always loved the idea of, and have tried to pick up translated fiction, but this book really solidified once again that translated fiction is something I really want to seek out, because being able to step into a novel that is not written for Americans, I think is a wonderful thing to do. So I went ahead and gave 4 stars to this strange and exhausting little book. And that is the end of the December... Let's go ahead and crack all my knuckles now. Are we done? Are we done? Okay. That's the end of my December reading wrap-up. Thank you for coming along with me. I'm still not good at outros, so we're just gonna go ahead and goodbye.